Hi, it's Curtis Joseph from Winterbloom Farm here, and with my cat Oliver. And it's late winter here, which means it's time to start thinking about buying seeds. And I wanted to take a moment to discuss a code that you might run into in some of your seed catalogs that's maybe a little bit on the obscure side. And to do that, let's just jump right in. We'll take a look at one of the catalog examples, and we'll unpack the code from there. So if we take a look at an entry from one of the catalogs, Johnny's Seeds here in Maine, and this is from their 2019 online catalog, we'll see if you take a look at this mustard variety on the left, Amara, there are a couple of icons that indicate various things about it, and one of them is this one that says PVP, right? And if you look at the index at the bottom of the catalog, you'll see that PVP means plant variety protected. So what does this mean? And it's also in other catalogs, actually. So I've got another example here. This is from High Mowing. And you'll notice they indicate this one a little bit differently. This is a tomato indigo rose. And at the end of the entry, it's harder to notice in this case. They've got a little entry that just says PVP. So what is PVP? And that gets us into the subject of this video. And to explain what PVP is, I'm going to take a quick detour and give you a very short history of plant patenting in the patents for plants in the United States. And we'll start in the 19th century. That's probably the best place to start. And in the 19th century, there were actually programs at the government level, the national level, that distributed seeds to farmers in the country. This started at the Patent Office and then at the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, which was founded, I think, in 1862. I'm not 100% sure about that, but they would actually distribute seeds to farmers across the country. And so here's a photo from the Library of Congress archives. I pulled this photo, and the next one that you'll see from this document at the USDA published called 150 Years of Research. And so here are stockpiles of seeds about to be shipped out. And then the next slide shows packers basically putting them into envelopes so that they can be sent out. And the USDA actually, in this period, late 19th century to the early 20th century, sent out quite a lot of seeds across the country. This is from Daniel Carpenter's book, The Forging of Bureaucratic Autonomy. And at the end of this paragraph, you'll see that in 1893, they mailed seeds to 1.8 million farmers. And then in 1900, maybe up to 3 million recipients. The budget at the time was $200,000, which was more than other divisions combined, right? So this was a big program. And the farmers were receiving these free seeds. They were also using them for their own breeding projects, right? So you would save the seed from the plants that did the best. Maybe you'd combine some varieties. So some of these farmers were inevitably using these seeds to improve the crops, to select for the best ones, maybe to find ones, a particular lettuce that just works better in their own regions where they're growing, and working on biodiversity that way. Now, I should say at this point in this period of time, there were also companies that sold seeds. Not all seeds were acquired from the government, but this was a big program. And this lasted for a while, but then some pressures came in to change the story. And that starts with a group called the American Seed Trade Association, which was founded in 1883. And these are basically seed lobbyists, basically members of the industry. And they put a lot of pressure on government to stop the free seed program, first of all, but also to start patenting plants. And I found this document on archive.org, and it's from the USDA Bureau of Markets Seed Reporter in 1919. And this is a reprint of a talk given at the American Seed Trade Association in 1919, and it gives you a sense of of where the Seed Trade Association wanted things to go. There are certain fallacies and traditional errors that have been handed down from generation to generation, which constitute a real impediment in the way of progress, certainly in the way of the progress that is necessary to place the production of many of our important seeds on a really sound basis. fallacies and traditional errors committed in just farmers saving seeds or creating their own breeding programs for seeds and crops that they might think would succeed better or sell better. And so the solution, according to this speaker, is that, individual effort can only do so much, but some of our largest and most important problems will require years of time, large outlays of money to affect their solution. We cannot expect individuals to undertake them. This is a call for muddied interests, for research, right? And um, this is a different topic that we can get into. What's the best way to breed a vegetable, a crop, right? Through a kind of mass open scale, farmers doing their own work, or through these corporations that are doing it with money, with research funds and things like that. But suffice to say, in this point, for our purposes, the American Seed Trade Association started putting pressure in lobbying government until finally, in 1930, Congress passed what's called the Plant Patent Act. Now, before this time, patent offices weren't granting patents at all on plants. They thought they were the creations of God or nature, not man, and they couldn't be patented. But finally, in 1930, the precedent was set when Congress passed this act. Now, there were a couple of important things to note about this act. It didn't cover plants grown from seed. This just covered plants reproduced asexually through budding or grafting or cuts, that sort of thing. And because it was still held at this period that the seed is a little inviolable, like you can't patent that. But the doors were open, and over time, over the course of the 20th century, more of these restrictions were put into law. So the next one, and this gets us back to our catalogs, 1970, the Plant Variety Protection Act, the PVPA, what shows up in the catalogs as PVP. Now, these actually weren't patents, they were certificates. They were patent-like protections given in the form of certificates. And they were actually given for seed-grown plants for the first time, right? But there were a couple of exemptions. So it protected certain seed-grown species, but there were some exemptions that farmers, for instance, in the farmer exemption, could use them. They could save the seeds, so they could buy the seeds, grow them, and then save them. And they could also sell them in small quantities to fellow farmers, right? And there was also an exemption that allowed these seeds to be used in breeding programs. This changed a little over time, like the first Plant Variety Protection Act, 1970, did include certain crops like potatoes. There was a revision or an amendment to it in 1994, which actually added in potatoes and F1 hybrids. We'll get into what those are at some other point if that's not a familiar term to you. But it also got rid of one of the exemptions. Farmers could no longer sell the seeds to other farmers. So at this point where it stands, Plant Variety Protection Act seeds cannot be, well, you can save them and you can use them in breeding programs, but you can't resell them or other things like that. And the thing about the PVP that I should mention is that it's a pretty public program. You can go on a government website and look up all the current plants that have these protections. And they also expire in periods of usually 20, 25 years. So there are a number of these breeds that actually have already expired, right? So there were a couple of other things that happened in the 20th century to bring these patents further along. One is in 1980, there was a Supreme Court decision, Diamond versus Chakrabarty. And the thing to say about this is what it allowed is it allowed for microorganisms to be patented. So for the first time, microorganisms could receive a patent on them. They were a product of human invention. And then this led to, in 1985, the Board of Appeals in interferences at the Patent Office that had a ruling called Ex parte Hibberd. And what this did was that it ruled that plants, seed-grown plants, could be subject to utility patents. And basically all that means is that it's a stronger protection than even the PVP. So, okay, what's a utility patent and what does it do? So let's take a look at another catalog. Again, this is Johnny's, right? And you can see right there at the top, another PVP variety. But if we look at the description of these varieties, you'll see something else. You'll see that they say utility patent granted, right? So these particular varieties have a utility patent, and it's not marked as clearly as PVP, it's at the end of the description. So what does that mean? Well, utility patents, again, following from the 1985 decision, basically what that means is when you buy a utility patent crop, you cannot save the seeds and you cannot use them to breed lettuce or other lettuce, in this case, lettuce or other crops, right? So it's illegal basically to save the seeds, to let the plant go to seed and then save those seeds for use next year, or to save the seed from the lettuce head that did really well and you let it bolt and you save the seed so you could use it again. That's not legal, nor is it legal to use this in a breeding program. So if you are trying to breed lettuce and you happen to let one of these varieties that's utility patented bolt and go to seed, you might get into some trouble if those genetics get into your plants. So that's utility patents, and they show up in other places as well. And they're beginning to show up more and more in catalogs. If we take a look at another catalog, again going back to High Mowing actually carries a couple varieties of lettuce that have utility patents, but the catalog does not indicate them as utility patented. And I wrote them an email and asked them about this and whether or not anywhere they indicate, at least in 2019 when I'm recording this, if they indicate that these varieties actually have utility patents. And they said, the reply that I received said that they didn't, but that all varieties that would have these patents are marked from Vitalis Organic Seeds, which is a organic seed breeding program which patents its species, it patents its varieties, I should say, that it creates of lettuce, for instance, in this case. So if it says this in the High Mowing catalog, then you know that there's a utility patent, right? And there aren't so many varieties yet that are utility patented. It's really limited in this case in organic seeds to these lettuces for the most part at this point, but it's potentially growing. And if we take a look at what Vitalis thinks that these patents mean, well, what the conditions are for these patents for Vitalis, this is from the Vitalis website, and you can see that the purchaser, which in this case are the resellers like Johnny's, who would be buying these seeds to sell to us, that they cannot use these to multiply or reproduce any other varieties. And they also are agreeing, just by buying them, to let the Vitalis or its parent company go and inspect their premises. So don't worry if you buy these seeds from a reseller. It doesn't mean that Vitalis is going to show up in your backyard. They're not so interested in that, maybe, but there is the final agreement here is that the purchaser, the reseller for us, isn't going to ensure that anyone like us, the end user who buys these seeds, is also going to comply with these agreements. So let's just pause for a second. These are the patents that might show up in your catalogs that maybe you're not so familiar with yet or haven't had a chance to really look at yet. PVP and utility patents, at least in these organic catalogs. And again, so just to refresh, PVP means that it's a plant variety protected. It's a public certificate. It means that for a period of 20 to 25 years from the granting of the certificate, that you can save the seed and you can use them in breeding programs. You just can't resell them, which in a sense isn't too different maybe from a lot of seed that you normally buy anyway. And then there are these utility patents, which are much tighter in their restrictions, right? And so you might be thinking now, if you're a small farmer or gardener, well, what does it matter? I buy my seed every year. If I buy my seed every year and just want to grow these varieties that I like, does it really matter if it has a PVP or utility patent? And effectively, maybe it doesn't at all. Maybe it doesn't matter at all to you. I think sometimes if you're not someone who saves seed, and if you don't, I'll make another video about this at some point. You might want to consider it because there are a lot of advantages and fun to doing it, increasing biodiversity being one of them. But if you don't save seed and you're not going to breed your own vegetables, then it might be a moot point for you. In that case, what I would say is that there is a philosophical consideration here, just to wrap up. And that's that it's this privatization of seeds. Now, these companies will tell you that basically they do this because they want to protect their investment, and it helps their research and development to get patents on their crops. And in the case of PVPs, I have heard of instances of smaller breeding companies using them to protect their varieties from larger corporations, for instance. So there are a lot of different scenarios that you can imagine. But if we think about the state of the seed companies in the world, this is a poster you might have seen before from Professor Phil Howard at Michigan State. He updates these once in a while. And it's basically a chart of the seed companies in this country, or actually some of these are global, and how they've been bought up. The big red bubbles here are chemical companies, and the arrows that go out are all the other companies that they have bought out or now own. And you can see that most of these seed companies that are these little blue bubbles are owned by basically just 4 chemical companies. Bayer, of course, merged with Monsanto, so that created a giant there. And so more and more, so much of the world's seeds that we buy and we use are being bought up and owned by these corporations, and many times they're under patents, right? So you can't save the seeds yourselves. You can't grow them again. There have been lawsuits where someone's, from a Monsanto lawsuit, I believe, where their corn pollinated someone else's corn, and that became a lawsuit, right? So this is happening more and more. And the more seeds are being, we buy seeds every year too, and we don't save them, we're not getting a lot of the benefits of biodiversity. That's another topic. But if you are interested in buying seeds that don't have these protections, let's just return once more to high mowing. There are some other alternatives. And one is, for instance, this thing called the Open Source Seed Initiative. You can see their website there. They are a group that promises that if you develop seeds and you give them to the Open Source Seed Initiative, you make a pledge. And that pledge is that basically, everyone can use those seeds for whatever purpose they want. Breeding, they can save them, they can do whatever they want to. And you in turn are pledging, that when you do this, that you're not going to restrict the seed with patents or whatnot. And they've got more to their pledge, that they think that seed should be free to grow and to share and to sell to other people. And if that's something you believe in, then this is one place where you can look into. Other places have that. There are some other places that grow heirlooms and varieties like that, like Seed Savers Exchange, or small seed savers in your area. And this is something that I want to write more about too. There are some all over the country of people who are saving and breeding rare seeds or heirloom seeds or seeds that have been bred over generations to be good in their particular regions, which is really important for biodiversity. So you can buy seeds that have no patent protections, seeds that have been pledged to be open in this case, or seeds from small growers, and maybe if you have a seed bank in your area, that's another alternative if you want to avoid patented seed. But anyway, there you go. That is a video on just one of the codes you might see in the catalogs that might be something that you're not so familiar with. And I hope this is something that's at least giving you pause to think. And as you continue to browse through your catalogs, maybe you'll keep a lookout for these certificates and patents in the vegetables that you're considering buying. Thanks so much.